Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted to feel more love in your heart and spirit all around you, then do we have the special show for you. Today I'll be talking with Radhanath Swami, a world-renowned spiritual leader and the best-selling author of The Journey Home, Autobiography of an American Swami, and the author of one of my new favorite spiritual books, The Journey Within. Today we'll be talking about attaining divine love and living a more spiritual existence in each and every moment. That plus we'll talk about cave dwelling in the Himalayas, the yoga of cooking, the secret of redwoods, Hanuman's tail, and what we can all learn from monkeys. So welcome to the show, Swami. Are you ready to shine?
Michael, I am so grateful and so honored to be with you on this beautiful show. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, and it's in our honor as well, and a mighty woohoo for you joining us on the show. So before we dive right into things, I've got to ask, what happened with your mom and a monkey?
In 1970, when I was 19 years old, I left home in Highland Park, Illinois, which is just north of Chicago, to go on a summer trip to Europe.
Yeah.
And I didn't have money, but one person sponsored me going, and I ended up hitchhiking to India. So my parents were obviously quite alarmed and worried about their teenage son hitchhiking through the Middle East to India, and then I would write them letters from the Himalayas telling them I was living in caves and I was studying from the leopards and the snakes and the cobras, and I thought they would feel that I was so cool, but they thought I was crazy. And eventually I came home, a very seasoned ascetic from a tradition of the Hindu Dharma. I was a devotee of Krishna. And just by our mutual respect for each other, gradually they really understood everything nicely. And finally, in 1989, my mother and father came to India for the first time. And they were just so happy to see the projects I was involved in and meet the people. So everything was going so nice. And we wanted to take them to an island called Elephanta, close to Mumbai. And we were walking down this earthen path through a forest to reach a historic cave where ancient carvings were made. And as we're walking down the path, this large brown monkey, a male monkey, jumped right in front of my mother and grabbed her purse. Then the monkey, he was a huge monkey. He opened his mouth really, really wide and showed his teeth and his sharp fangs and screeched like, and my mother, it was really a culture shock, a lady from the suburbs of Chicago. And the monkey pulled at her purse, and my mother pulled back, and the monkey pulled and my mother pulled, and then finally the monkey really screeched loud and jumped right into my mother's face. His teeth were just inches from her nose. And then he kicked her in the chest and grabbed the purse and ran away. My father and mother were shocked. This was 1989.
They just got mugged by a monkey.
It was like that. They said, our passports, our airline tickets, all of our cash, your mother's jewelry, and our credit cards, everything of any value that we took to India is in that purse. My father said that. And my mother looked at me and said, what are you going to do about it? You're the one who brought us here. And I looked at the monkey, was about a half a block away on this forest path, and he was up on a high branch of a tree opening the purse. And I didn't know what to do, so I closed my eyes and said a little prayer to God, who I call Krishna. I said, please help me. Everything was going so well till now. And please understand, Michael, that in 1989 in India, the bureaucracy of getting your passports and your visas and your airline tickets and your credit cards, it would take weeks of standing in line of my elderly mother and father to try to get those things back, to even leave the country. It was really a crisis for them. So I opened my eyes after my little prayer, and I happened to see a distance ahead of me on the path. On the left-hand side, there was a fruit vendor. He had a little cart with wheels, and it was piled up with fruit. So I ran over to him, and I asked him for one banana. He wanted to charge me about 10 times the price of a banana. I said, I'm a Swami, I'm a monk, please give me charity of one banana. And he was very, very adamant that I had to pay him this large sum for the banana. Sometimes, Michael, when you're in an emergency situation, you have to act in such ways that it's not becoming of your character. I try to be an honest person. So I grabbed the banana and ran. He became so offended by that I defied him, that he picked up a stick and started chasing me. And I was running, and he was running, and I was running, and he was running. And suddenly, a different monkey jumped on his cart and started taking all his fruit. So when he saw that, he turned around and decided to chase this other thief instead of me. So I got away, and I ran to the tree where our particular monkey was chewing on my mother's American Express card.
Can't leave home without it.
And I showed him the banana. The monkey looked at the banana and took interest. Mm-hmm. I hadn't thrown things for many, many years, so I wasn't a very good shot. But I threw it as close as I could, but because it didn't get so close to him, the monkey had to leap to catch the banana. But as he leaped, the purse fell down to the ground. And most of it just spilled all over the ground, and I put it all back in, and I presented the purse to my mother. She was so proud of me. My father said, "How did you do that? You outsmarted a monkey. Where did you learn to do that?" And my mother said, "I'm so proud of you." And they both started embracing me. And my mother took about several rupees out of her purse and said, "Go pay the fruit vendor," something that I forgot all about. So I ran over and paid the fruit vendor, and it was far more than he even asked for. So the fruit vendor was happy. My mother and father were really happy. I was so happy. And I looked up at the monkey eating the banana, and he looked really happy. So it was a win-win solution.
I love it.
Now, the moral of the story is, in many, many traditions, the mind is compared to a monkey. It has a tendency to jump into places and go to places that really isn't very beneficial for us or others. And how to keep the monkey as our friend. The Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells, Param dristvani vartate, vishayavani vartante, niraharasya dehina, rasavarajamrasopyasya param dristvani vartate. That this monkey-like mind that's always looking for something else, temptations and fears, and we're vulnerable to all these things. But if we experience something higher, then that higher taste, that higher experience makes the mind satisfied. Just like the banana made the monkey very well behave because he liked the banana better than the credit card. And in the same way, everyone is looking for pleasure. Ananda mayobhyashat. That's something, whether it's a little ant crawling across our kitchen cabinet or whether it's a CEO of a corporation, everyone is looking for pleasure. And when a mosquito comes and bites us, they don't want to hurt us. They're just looking for pleasure. We just happen to be their pleasure. So this is something common wherever there's life. And the spiritual principle behind this is that our nature, the nature of the living force, in Sanskrit it's the Atma, or the soul, the spirit, is looking for love. Only love can satisfy the heart. Things could give some amount of satisfaction to the mind and senses for a short time, but only love can give fulfillment to the heart. And actual fulfillment in life is a state of the heart. And this is because the nature of the soul is its seeking to love and to be loved. And the fullest perfection and origin of that tendency to love is between the soul and the Supreme Soul, who we also call God or Krishna or Allah or Jehovah. There's many names of that one God, but that unity of love between the soul and God, to feel the limitless love of God and to be an instrument of that love in expressing it to other living beings through whatever we do, whether we're doctors or lawyers or entertainers or swamis or farmers or engineers. If instead of seeking some things to get out of what we're doing, if we taste the sweetness of that love that's within ourselves, that's our true nature, that is our essence, then the greatest joy in life is to share that love by living in a spirit of compassion with others. And then the monkey of the mind becomes our very, very good friend because it's experiencing the banana of divine love.
Beautiful. I want to ask more about the banana of divine love. Before I do that, you brought up something that I keep asking myself, do I want to share? Do I want to ask about this? So I'm going to share, and if it seems too strange, we'll even edit it out. But you said something that really struck me and struck a chord for this week. I had wanted to ask about your experience in the Himalayas and in the caves, and you mentioned something about tigers, and I'm not sure if it was panthers or something to that effect, and I'm not sure about how much, or snakes and panthers, or snakes and tigers, and I'm not sure how much of that is metaphor. My wife and I have been having some very interesting experiences recently, and 2 days ago, they keep on getting more intense. 2 days ago, we were out on the trails in the Appalachians here, outside of New York City, and we came across a rattlesnake, which seems to be coming up more and more to us. And the rattlesnake was not scared by us. It didn't rattle. It looked at us, and it ended up climbing a tree directly in front of me and coming down in kind of a U shape, and then spending at least 10 minutes looking at me in front of me, eye to eye, about 7 or 8 feet apart. I admittedly was scared to go closer than that. Does any of that make any sense to you? He stayed for a while, or she stayed. We went quiet. We could sense love. A second rattlesnake came out from between the rocks. Then it went back in. 2 mice appeared. My wife asked the snake to spare the mice life. It was busy eye to eye with me. Does this make any sense to you? I'm thinking, you of all people, you just mentioned the snakes, so I had to ask.
Well, it's hard to psychologically analyze a rattlesnake, but there are lessons that we could learn, in our own lives, and that we can share with others through these different experiences. And what I get out of this story of yours is that you are not looking at the rattlesnake with envy, with enmity. were looking at the rattlesnake as a sentient living being who wants to be happy in this world.
We're sending
And
as
I
much
think
love as we could.
And I think that the rattlesnake could experience that. And he was experiencing something very, very satisfying to his soul, to his heart, just by being in the presence of someone who was looking at him with compassion. And in The Journey Home, the first book that I wrote, I tell the story of my travels to India, in India. And there's one section where I was living in the Himalayas, quite deep in the jungles, with one very elder, homeless sadhu, or spiritual seeker. Mm-hmm. His name was Kailash Baba. And Kailash Baba was, for about 50 years, just traveling homeless. He was quite a deep person. And I learned from him how to live in the jungles. And he taught me what leaves I could eat and what leaves I shouldn't eat, and how to survive. And one of the most important lessons he taught was how to live with my neighbors, because there were no human neighbors. Mm-hmm. There were leopards, and there were snakes, and there were wild boars, and there was a lot of monkeys, and there was scorpions. And we didn't have a house. We were just sleeping on the ground. And he said that if you fear them, if you have enmity toward them, then they will sense that fear and they will strike. And here, this is their territory. You are dependent on them. If you see them as parts of God, if you see them as brothers and sisters, and you actually feel compassion and affection for them, and most of all, respect, they will sense that in you, and they will respect you, and they will not harm you. But if you feel that you're superior to them, or if you feel fear of them, they will strike you. And he was basically explaining this teaching of the Gita, that true wisdom is to learn to see everyone with equal vision, to see that the living force, whether we're Hindus or Muslims or Jews or Jains or Sikhs or Buddhists or agnostics or atheists, or whether we're black or white or red or brown or yellow in color, or whether from the east or the west, or rich or poor, whether we're humans or dogs or cats or elephants or cows or snakes, the living force within us, the soul, is divine. It's a child of God. And when we recognize that spiritual essence within ourself, which is the journey within, which is the truest goal of yoga, is to harmonize the body, the mind, with the living force, with the soul. And then to harmonize the soul with God, with nature, the environment, and to live in harmony with other living beings. Because when we understand our own eternal nature, our own loving nature that's within us, and it's always there, nothing can take that away, it can only be forgotten by us, then we can recognize the divinity of life, and that all life is our brothers and sisters. In the Bible, Jesus says that the first and great commandment is to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. And actually, everyone is our neighbor. And when we learn to love ourselves, when we recognize ourselves, then we love our neighbor as ourselves. So he was teaching me this simple lesson. And you know, Michael, I lived in that forest with him for some time, and we saw these animals and snakes and scorpions and everything. And I didn't go up and touch them, because that's not really respecting them. I was giving them their distance with respect, and they were giving me my distance with respect. And because Kailash Baba had such a deep realization on this subject, then just being with him, I felt that compassion. being with him, I felt no fear of these animals, and we were living together peacefully. And it is true that when we have that compassion for another, they can sense it, they can experience it. And I believe that that rattlesnake was looking at you because although he may or may not have intellectually understood what was going on, somewhere in his heart and his soul, he felt a sense of transcendent love and respect, and he was reciprocating.
Woohoo! Thank you. Thank you. And I think to draw that story full circle, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, you live in New York City, or at least you spend a decent amount of time there now. What an important way to go about our journeys with everybody else we meet, and in our businesses, and in everything that we do, if we send that love out to each person and see them that way ourselves.
Wherever we are, when we find that home within ourselves, then we could really feel at home, and we could really feel that God's creation is our family.
I love it. So how do we answer the question, and then I want to dive more into this banana of love. How do we answer the question, who am I? Simple question, I know. Who am I?
I'll present a very simple, basic way of addressing this question.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to ask someone, who are you? They would probably give me their name. But we could change our name, but we still remain the same. These days, you could change your religion, you could change your nationality, you could change your sex, and the body's always changing from childhood to youth to old age. Who is it that is the witness of all of these different changes? When I was a little tiny baby, I was crying for my mother's milk. That was my highest reality. Now I'm 65 years old, and it's been a long time since I've cried for my mother's milk. So my mind is completely different than it was then. And my body certainly looks very, very different than it did then. So the body and the mind and the world are always changing. But who is it that is the I? And the great spiritual literatures describe that it is the soul, the Atma, the living force that is spiritual, that is a part of God, that is the witness that's seeing through the eyes and tasting through the tongue and smelling through the nose and hearing through the ears and feeling through the flesh and thinking through the brain and loving through the heart. It's that living force. And when that living force leaves the body's like an automobile without a driver. It really cannot function. But when an automobile has a driver in it, it could do so many things. Mm-hmm. So similarly, we are the driver within the vehicle of this body and mind. The mind is like the interior of the vehicle, and the body is like the exterior. And that soul, in the Bible, it is said that what profiteth a person if they gain the whole world, but they lose their eternal soul? In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells, Najayate mriyate va kadachit, nahanyate anyamane sarire, that the nature of the living force, the nature of you and me, mm-hmm. our true self, the witness of these bodily changes, we are without birth and without death. We're eternal. Death is like a change of clothes, or it's like going from one car to another car. We remain the same. Our particular body, when it's no longer able to function, to sustain the presence of the soul's purpose, then the soul moves on to another. This is called transmigration of the soul. So we are that living force. And what is it that I need? What is it that I really want? A car needs oil and gasoline. But the driver of the car needs something else. So similarly, we have to give the body and the mind what it needs. But what are the needs of my true self? What is the need of my heart? What is the need of my soul? It's to reconnect with that pleasure, that love, that fulfillment that is our true nature. Dharma is a Sanskrit word which literally means the intrinsic nature of something. The dharma of a chili pepper is it's hot. The dharma of sugar is it's sweet. What is the dharma, the jiva dharma, the dharma of the true self? It's to serve with love. And when we connect to the love of God, to the love of the Supreme, and we feel that Satchit Ananda, that eternal, that great knowledge and that ecstasy that we're all seeking, then our desire is to serve the Supreme and to serve all that is dear to the Supreme. And ultimately, every soul, the world itself is dear to the Supreme. Then we're no longer in a mood of trying to exploit, control, possess, enjoy, but our joy is in serving with love.
So, thank
and
you.
that's really who we are. And that's what we're all really looking for. There's a beautiful analogy of a deer that has an organ within its body that excretes this scent called musk.
Yeah.
And musk is one of the most costly fragrances in the world. It smells so nice that the deer is seeking to enjoy that smell. And he spends his whole life looking for the forest, trying to find where that smell is coming from, and never realizes that it's within himself. He's looking everywhere else for what's within himself. And that's the story of practically all of us. We're looking everywhere else for what's within ourselves. And a truly meaningful and fulfilling life, a life of true religion, true yoga, true humanity, is when we learn to serve with love. And in order to do that in a complete way, it's very simple. We simply need to awaken that love that's dormant within us.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's go from there and let's talk about awakening this love and maybe dive into some of your 5 practices. And maybe you can talk with us about living in sacred space.
We are very much affected by the people we're with and the environment we're in. Mm-hmm. Just like if you want to study for an exam, you usually go to a library. You don't go to a rock concert. So, according to our purpose in our life, we try to be with the types of people in the type of environment that actually facilitates, encourages, and inspires us. So sacred space, it's within us. And to put some time aside every day to actually find that sacred space within us, to reconnect with it through meditation, through prayer, through puja. In the tradition that I follow, it's especially emphasized mantra or divine sound vibrations that actually tune us into the frequency of grace and love that's not only within us, but it's all pervading everywhere within this world. It's just that we're tuned into so many other things that we're not really accessing. But this mantra, and we chant this Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. But there are many mantras, there are many names of God, and their purpose is really to tune us into that sacred space that's within. And to help us to do that, it's nice to have a sacred space within our own home, where we kind of reserve to do our spiritual meditation, our prayer and our chanting. And it's nice to go to holy places where there are enlightened people on a regular basis that help to keep our focus on what's the real meaningful and beautiful goal in life that we should be striving to achieve, while we're simultaneously performing all of our other duties.
I love it. I'm thinking an example that came to me before the show is I used to be a bicycle racer, professional level, for many years, and I remember doing this one race years ago, and I was scared for some reason. A lot of people maybe get hurt in this race or crash and fall. And I'd been deep into my meditation practice. I was also quite a regular practicing Jew at the time. And there was this prayer, a Shema Yisrael prayer. It's called the Shema. It's like a chant. And I started chanting it for the bike race as it went along, and people fell and accidents happened. And I chanted and chanted and chanted, and I'll be darned if I didn't actually win a prize in that race. And the most important prize that I won, though, was that feeling of connection I got. I turned the race. I ended up giving up bike racing not too long afterwards. I ended up turning it into a real spiritual experience by diving into the mantra.
That's beautiful. That what really is our success? Is success just the monetary rewards or the fame or the prestige that we get? Or is it reconnecting with that true goal in our life? Samsiddhir Haritoshanam. When we actually tune into the grace of God, when we please God, when we serve God, and we're honestly, with integrity, with character, and with devotion, when we're trying our best in whatever we're doing, it's the intention that is really the success of our life. My beloved Guru, Srila Prabhupada, he wrote something that really became like a foundation in my life of how I look at the world and how I make decisions. Mm-hmm. He wrote that God does not see just what we do. He sees the intention in the purpose in which we do it. And there's a beautiful analogy of Hanuman, who was a very, very powerful, great devotee of Ram, and he was building a bridge across the Indian Ocean in the service of Ram, who is it's a name of God, Ram. And he was lifting huge mountain peaks and putting them on the ocean and making them float. And as he was carrying a giant boulder in the middle of the ocean, there was a little spider, and the spider with one of his legs was kicking sand. Now, what is the difference between a massive boulder and a grain of sand? And the spider was standing in the path that Hanuman was trying to cross. Mm-hmm. Ram, who was behind Hanuman, he told Hanuman that actually that spider is doing just as much as you. According to his capacity, he's trying his best. According to your capacity, you're trying your best. And you're both trying to do something noble. You're both trying to do an act of devotion. So if we strive to do something well, with the right intentions, with the right purpose, that in itself is our victory. That is our success, not just the external outcome. Because so many times we see in this world People get their external outcome. But if they don't reach it for the right purpose, with the right character and integrity, they win, but they've lost. But even if we lose, we win. If we do it in such a way, with the integrity, with the character, and with the purpose, it brings us closer to God and closer to our true self.
What does it mean to be a servant?
The Sanskrit word seva means to serve with love. There's a beautiful verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Savai pungsang parodharmo yato bhaktir hokshaje ahoitaki apratihata yayatma suprasidati. That the supreme dharma, sometimes dharma is translated as religion or occupation or nature. The supreme dharma, param dharma, is to serve the Supreme Lord with love. Such service should be unmotivated by selfishness or egoism and uninterrupted by external changing circumstances. The will to serve, the will to show compassion to other living beings in the service of the Lord. There's another beautiful analogy in the Srimad Bhagavatam that if you pour water on the root of a tree, that water naturally extends to every part of the tree. The leaves, the branches, the twigs, the flowers, and all the living beings, the birds and the insects that are living in the tree, they're all eating those things. So by watering the root of the tree, you're literally nourishing every part of the tree. And similarly, when we awaken this divine love within our hearts, this love for the Supreme, this love for Krishna or God, then naturally that love extends to every living being. Because God is the source of everything and everyone. And when we love God, the testimony is not just a sectarian affiliation that I'm better than everyone else because I have this connection to God. True love of God, which is the essence and the purpose of all great spiritual paths, the testimony is we become humbled by that love. We become so grateful to that love. We don't need to engage in wasteful activities when we experience that love. Every one of our activities then becomes, even if we're a mother or a father or a student or if we're in business or agriculture or politics, we have a very deep, purposeful reason to do things because it's a way of expressing the love that we've discovered within our hearts. And we naturally see our relationship with everyone in that love.
What if we're struggling to find that love? How do we... I can hear people who are listening who are going, I'm not feeling that love. What do I do?
The first thing is to acknowledge that that's what we really want. And when we acknowledge that, then we begin the journey within, or the journey home. Then we naturally want to, as much as possible, read those things, associate with those people that actually give us the inspiration, the faith, and the guidance by which we can find that love. And then we start applying the principles to our own life. I like to express three things that my Guru Srila Prabhupada taught. That satsang is to associate with people who uplift us, who really help to keep our focus on what's really important in life. Sadhana is having a spiritual practice every day to tune into that frequency of our true nature, of grace, of love, of peace. And sadachar is to live in a spirit of service, to live with character, to live with moral and ethical integrity. And if we do these three things, we associate with uplifting people, we put some quality time aside to actually go within and reconnect with our true self. You know, that yoga is a method of doing that. and then we actually try to live in that spirit that we connect with. Then discovering that divine love or awakening within us becomes very, very natural. It's there. It just begins with wanting it and recognizing it, and then being with people who help us and doing the things that help us, and integrating that in all aspects of our life. It's simple. It's accessible to literally everyone. I remember one lady, she was a dear friend of mine. I was at her deathbed. She was dying of cancer. She was a very active lady her whole life. She was a mother of 5. And now she was paralyzed, and her husband had to clean her excrement, and she had to be spoon-fed. And she said, compared to what I used to be, I seem to be so irrelevant. But then she said, but I have limitless relevance because God loves me. Her name for God is Krishna also. She said, because Krishna loves me. And nothing and no one can take that away from me, not even death. When you experience that love that is within us, it's our real wealth, it's our real treasure. And she said, and I can't be arrogant because God loves everyone. That love is within all of us. And it's our nature to live in that way. But somehow or other, we become conditioned and habituated to living in so many unnatural ways. So to recognize it, to desire it, and then to take even small steps and apply them in our life to come closer to that love within us. And this chanting of God's name is a very simple thing that children can do it, and great scholars can do it. It's a divine vibration that actually awakens that inner peace, that inner happiness, that inner love that's eternally our self.
Thank you. Before we ask a few wrap-up questions and do a short meditation, can you share with us briefly a little bit of the story of your industrious friend? I'll probably get his name. I apologize. Hrishikesh?
Yes. Rishikesh, he's one of the most beautiful people I've ever met in my life. And as is his wife, Rekha, and his children. He's a wonderful family person. And his family was one of the most successful, powerful, wealthy, industrialist business families in the whole of India. And his father retired at a certain time, and before his father retired, India changed so many of its policies and opened up so much for foreign companies to come into India, and had certain taxes that they changed the structure of. And almost all of the very large corporations and companies that were in his particular business, they went bankrupt. It was almost impossible to compete and to survive under that situation. And now, he had just taken over the business from his father. He had tens and thousands of employees and stockholders, and it was international. It was very, very difficult. And he really worked hard. He had to deal with the labor unions, and he had to deal with the governments, and he had to deal with liquidating different properties. Very, very intense. Mm-hmm. But he would come every morning to the ashram and very peacefully just chant God's names with the monks and the other family people that would come every morning. And he would, during the chanting, he would be sitting completely immersed in just connecting with God's grace with such a grateful heart. And during the kirtan, he would just smile and dance. And then he would go out and do everything he had to do to bring his business out of that severe crisis. And he did it. He brought his business out of that crisis in a situation that practically anybody else would either be going to psychologists and psychiatrists in depression, or becoming drug addicts, or suicide. A lot of that was going on. But he was happy. He was fulfilled. And at the same time, he was totally effective in his occupation. And I remember I asked him, how do you do this? I mean, you have a wife, you have 3 children, and you're taking care of them while doing all of these other things. And he just smiled with a twinkle in his eyes. He said, because I just feel so grateful for all I've been given. I've been given the company of such beautiful people, and I've been given God's names and God's grace, and I'm grateful, and I'm happy. And I can do anything because I have that.
I love it. Thank you. From there, any words of advice that you would give to parents for their kids today?
As a Swami, I've never married, I've never had a relationship, and I don't have children.
Given that,
whatever I say is it's based on my observations and my studies. It's not based on it. But the principle is what affects children the most is our own personal example. We can teach children, really what we feel is the best for the things for them to know. And we should do that. But unless we're living examples, it's hard for the children to really take it seriously. In the spiritual setting, we understand that these children are not just my children. These are God's children, entrusted in my care. And I have a deep responsibility to protect, to be a caretaker of God's property, to my child's body, to my child's mind, and to my child's soul, by giving physical protection, food and clothing and medicine is the best I can, by giving emotional nourishment through really encouraging them and appreciating them and inspiring them and being a really good example for them to see, and by caretaking for their souls by our own example of living according to spiritual principles. And if we really feel that my wife is not just my wife, she's God's daughter entrusted my care, and my husband is not just my husband, he's God's son that's entrusted in my care, and these children are God's children entrusted in my care, and my home and my wealth and all of my abilities, they are all gifts of God entrusted in my care. So let us interact with all that we've been given in all of our relationships with this spirit of gratitude and respect and service. And when we actually have that, then to make sacrifices of our own selfishness to give a good example for our children, that deeply affects them. And sometimes when children are teenagers, I know from my own personal life, we have a tendency to rebel. My mother, I'll give an example. Once it was her birthday, and I forgot to give her a gift. So I ran out to the backyard of our little house in Illinois, and she had a rose garden. She only had about 3 or 5 rose bushes growing, and there was just one rose on the bush, and I just ripped it off. And I ran into the house
out of love
and handed it to my mother, and I said, "Happy birthday, Mother." She took that rose and she smelled it and put it to her head and pressed it to her heart and cried and said, "Thank you." She said, "If you gave me diamonds or pearls, it would not be more valuable to me than this rose." She said, "It's not the thing that counts, it's the thought that counts. It's the love in which we offer something that gives it value to the heart. Its monetary value may give some satisfaction to the mind, but it doesn't touch the heart. It's the love that gives connection to the heart." And this was the way my mother raised me, and my father was the same way. When I was 8 years old, he was the largest Edsel dealer in Chicago.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are watching this show, who know what Edsels are, you know what I'm talking about. It was the biggest disaster in automobile history. He went into total bankruptcy, and he was struggling and struggling and struggling to somehow or other make a living and keep the different debtors from taking away our house. And he was really working practically early morning till late night trying to recover financially. And I remember he used to tell me that the only thing that's really important is our love for each other. And I said, "Well, why are you doing all this working then?" He said, "Because I have to do that too." But that's not what's really important. It's our love for each other. So this was the basis that my mother and father raised me. And of course, in the 1960s, when I was a teenager, I totally rebelled against them and everything they stood for. But then when I went to the spiritual path, and I found, the deeper purpose of life, I understood that what my mother and father were teaching me were the basis by which I was able to recognize what I was really looking for in life. And it's what I'm teaching wherever I go from a spiritual perspective. So yes, if we really give our children that love. My mother and father were, when I was a small boy, they were about to separate. And when they saw that I was crying because it was so inconceivable to me, they decided, we're going to work out everything for the sake of our child. And they did, and it wasn't easy, but the love that developed through them and in them for each other, because they had a higher principle than just, their differences. These things affected me in a very, very profound way. And it also, of course, affected the quality of their own lives. So for our children, to teach them the value of love, to teach them the value of unselfishness, to teach them the value of true ethics and morality, through our words, through where we take them, and through our example is the highest way that we can show our love and care for our children.
Thank you. Thank you.
The question you're asking, it's when I was living in Vrindavan, which is a holy place of pilgrimage for devotees of Krishna in India. There are about 5,000 temples scattered through beautiful forests with ashrams. Millions of pilgrims come from all over India and the world to go there every year. And it's been a holy place for about 5,000 years. So I was living there on the bank of a river. This was in 1971, and in those days, Vrindavan was a very, very quiet place most of the time. And I was sitting on the bank of the river where I would sleep at night in the early morning, and I was chanting Radha, Krishna, God's names, and it was just so peaceful, and the sun was rising, the peacocks were cawing, and the parrots were chirping, and the river was singing a beautiful song in front of me. And out from the forest behind me came this very traditional, orthodox-looking holy man from the Hindu religion. He had long matted hair. He had the robes of a sadhu or a spiritual monk. And he sat next to me and started describing the esoteric significance of where we were sitting. This is where, he said, 5,000 years ago, Krishna did this activity and Radha did this activity, and he was just going on and on. It seemed like universes away from anywhere else in the planet, just being with this holy person. We spoke for quite a while, and then he looked at me in the eyes very penetratingly and said, I want to give you something that I have had for over 40 years. And this thing, he said, has helped me so much in my love for Krishna. And then he just looked at me to see if I was ready to receive it. Then he reached his hand in this old tattered cloth shoulder bag he had, and he pulled out this little piece of folded paper. And he handed it to me. And he didn't say another word. He stood up and walked away, and I never saw him again after that. I'm sitting on the riverbank all alone, and I'm holding this paper. It's yellowish from being so old, and it's kind of flaky because he was carrying it for so long. And I was wondering, what is this? Is this a sacred incantation? Is this an ancient mantra? What is this? My curiosity, my anticipation was soaring as I was looking at the current of the river. And then very carefully I unfolded the paper and looked. I could not believe what I was seeing. It was the prayers of St. Francis. My dear Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where he says, where there is hatred, let me sow love. And I had read that prayer, long, long ago, and it always inspired me, but I never really made the connection. And when I read it there in Vrindavan in the context of receiving it from such an elevated, advanced devotee of Krishna, I understand the universal principle of bhakti. Bhakti means love, devotion, from the spirit, from the soul. The love between God and the soul, and the love between the souls and each other and other souls is the true definition of bhakti. Bhakti yoga is the yoga process that leads us to awaken that love. And how this very elderly, scholarly, mystical bhakti yoga wanted to share with me something that inspired him. the simple prayers of St. Francis, which emphasizes not what we receive, but what we give, and how we serve with love, with God in the center. That's the most beautiful, meaningful, purposeful, and satisfying way to live. And that applies whether we're living on a little riverbank in a holy place, or in a cave in the Himalayan jungles, or whether we're living in an apartment in New York City, taking care of our children, working a job, whatever it may be. That bhakti is there for all of us.
What a beautiful, beautiful reminder. It's one of my all-time favorite, like having a favorite movie or something, but one of my all-time favorite prayers, and always a beautiful reminder. So on that note, where can people go to find out more and to find your beautiful book? And everyone, this is, I was telling Swami before the show, I've read a lot of spiritual books, and I like a lot of spiritual books, but this is one out of a sacred handful that to me is a part. The energy that's in here, the story after story after story. I'm petting this book. This is rare that I actually pet. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm actually petting this. Okay, anyway, where can people go to get this beautiful book?
As you're petting the book, I really feel you're petting me on top of the head.
All right, I think I'll go back to that.
You are so gracious and kind. Thank you very, very much, Michael.
Well, thank you.
I wrote the book. I'm not so expert at all the other details of it, but Amazon.com and many bookstores.
And we'll find the links. We'll get them on our website. Go to inspirenationshow.com. We'll come up with the links for you. Any last words of wisdom then you want to share before we go to a meditation?
There's a beautiful saying that I open up the first chapter of this book with. You can tell how rich you are by counting how many things you have that money cannot buy.
I love it.
And we could be billionaires. We could be millionaires. We could be struggling middle class. We could be monks without anything materially. But what is that wealth? We could be the wealthiest people, as whether we're millionaires or whether we're swamis with nothing. The real wealth is the love that's within us. To love and to feel loved. A little girl, if she's given very beautiful clothing and beautiful toys, but the parents don't have time to give her love, she looks pretty, but she lives in misery. Ultimately, she wants to be loved, and she wants to give love. And that's the nature of everyone, however complicated we may be. And that's our real wealth. And true humanity, through every culture throughout history, in its really true sense, humanity is to learn how to respect others, to learn how to love others, and to actually learn how to find that love in God's grace.
I have no other words, but I love it. Thank you. Thank you. So, do you have a short meditation you feel called to share with people?
Meditation on reconnecting with our true self.
Mm-hmm.
We can close our eyes and experience the sensation of our bodies, experience the sensation of our breathing, observe the various changes that may be occurring in our minds, and being aware that I am the witness. And this witness is eternal. It's a part of God. And our true potential is simply to reconnect with that, with who we are. And in our tradition, the chanting of mantra or God's names really helps us to open our hearts and awaken our true spiritual potential. There are many mantras, and in our scriptures and in our tradition over hundreds and hundreds of years, great saintly people, both monks as well as people who were very active within this world with families, they emphasize this Maha Mantra, which means the great mantra. And it's 32 syllables, 16 words. And in India, it's so very, very common across so many thousands of different traditions, the chanting of this mantra. And if you could repeat after me each word, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I thank you very much.
Thank you. This is so beautiful. I gotta crank it back up for the finish. For everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get the journey within, and begin in earnest, and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much, Michael, and thank you to all of your audience. It's truly been an honor and great joy. You're such a gracious person, and I'm deeply grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. It so goes both ways. If there is ever anything we can do to help on our side of things, please don't hesitate to ask. We support you. We love you. We love your work.
You're petting my head again.
Is that disrespectful? I hope not.
I'm enjoying it too much. Thank you. It's the love is affection is the highest expression of respect. And thank you. You are full of that love and that affection.
As are you. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!